So this month, Amazon is putting their best movies on Freevee instead of Prime Video. Let me show you what I mean. In this video, we'll cover all of the best movies that Amazon Prime just recently added to Prime Video and their free streaming service, Freevee. Now, the catch is that Freevee does have ad breaks, but if you're around my age or older, then you remember that 5-minute commercial breaks would interrupt a 20-minute show 4 times before it ended. Freevee's ad breaks are much fewer and farther between. The full list of movies can be found in the top pinned comment down below, along with where you can currently stream them in other countries like Canada, UK, and Australia. But we're gonna kick this list off with a couple of action movies coming to Prime Video this month, starting with Heist. Now, even though this is a mediocre movie, it does feature an all-star cast, including Robert De Niro, David Bautista, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and Gina Carano. It does have straight-to-streaming vibes, meaning it's not a fantastic action movie, but it is kind of cool, and most of it does take place on a public bus, so it will remind you of superior movies like Speed. Speaking of superior movies, though, I consider Push to be a highly underrated movie. Now, I wish that this was better. It could have easily been much better, but it is about people with superpowers, and there's a slightly different take on it. But considering that movies with a different take on superpowers are literally a dime a dozen these days, Push is kind of in the middle of the pack in that genre, earning it 1 point on this video. Now, my bottom 2 recommendations on the Freevee side of this list starts with Only the Brave, which is actually an excellent movie about firefighters. And not just any firefighters. I mean, these are elite firefighters tasked with extinguishing this massive forest fire. This is based on a true story, and it's incredibly well done. I do feel like the story gets a little bit lost, but it's an incredible production. Everything looks top-notch, and the acting is fantastic, earning it 1 point on this list. And they're also adding The Shallows with Blake Lively, which is a really killer shark thriller. She spends most of the movie trapped on a rock, trying to figure out how to get back to shore with gigantic man-eating sharks in the water. And not only is this beautifully shot, but it's got some really tense moments in it. It is a popcorn movie. In no way does this feel really grounded, but it's a fun watch, earning it 1 point. Plus, Blake Lively is smoking hot throughout the entire movie, earning it a 2nd point. Back to Prime Video for the dramatic art film crowd. They're going to be adding Capote, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman, largely considered one of his greatest performances. Hoffman portrays Truman Capote, the famous writer of In Cold Blood, and this movie is about him writing that book. And he forms a relationship with one of the killers while writing the book. It is fairly slow-paced, but it is an excellent movie. However, I feel like everyone that wanted to see this movie saw it years back when it came out. So while I do recommend it, I don't really recommend it for multiple viewings, earning it 0 points on this list. In a similar category of the art house drama, the recent release, Kajillionaire, is added to Freevee.
Most people want to be kajillionaires. That's the dream. That's how they get you hooked. Hooked on sugar, hooked on caffeine. Ha ha ha, cry, cry, cry. Me, I prefer to just skim.
Now, this is a weird movie that is not for everybody, but if you typically like art house films, then this is an excellent one. Not only are there fantastic performances in this movie, but it's got a bizarre, quirky edge to it that I found really refreshing. The less you know about this one, the better, but if you tend to like quirky little indie flicks, then this may be a hit for you. If you don't, I don't know that there's enough to grab onto with Kajillionaire, but still, it earns another point on the list for Freevee. Prime Video just added Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, which is a fantastic movie to watch with the kids. Jim Carrey is incredible in it, and it's a fantastic adaptation of that famous book, earning it 2 points on the Prime Video side. But Freevee earns a family-friendly point with the original The Flintstones movie, which is a really fun watch. It's packed with practical effects, some CGI, and some of the jokes are pretty outdated, but still, it is a fun watch with the family, and I could say the same thing about Angry Birds. Not my favorite movie on this list, but still, Freevee picks up 2 points where Prime only got 1. Now, for comedies, Prime Video is adding Zoolander, which is still, to this day, an incredibly funny movie. So many of the jokes are so silly and not topical that they manage to hold up for decades. And there's so many comedy legends in here with cameos and things. It's just top-notch stuff, earning Prime Video 2 points in the comedy category, yet they also added Zoolander 2, which was Beyond a Dumpster Fire, which is -4, so they're actually in the hole on this category. But the comedies that Freevee is adding include Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby.
I like to picture Jesus in a tuxedo t-shirt because it says like, I want to be formal, but I'm here to party too.
Kindergarten Cop, which still holds up to this day. If it's been a while since you've seen it, I promise you it's full of laughs. This movie still works.
You mean you eat other people's lunches? Stop it!
And I could say the same thing about The Breakfast Club. Even though it's quintessential 80s, so many of the themes and the things that these characters talk about in this movie are somehow still relevant today, even though we live in a vastly different world, earning it another 2 points on this list. Freevee is also adding The Watch and Our Idiot Brother for a combined total of 0 points. Escape from LA comes to Prime Video. Not my favorite. In fact, this is such a silly, weird, kind of awkward sequel that it's fun to watch as a terrible movie. And I say that as someone who is a huge fan of Escape from New York. So it gets 1 point for entertainment value and loses a point for just kind of being a shitty movie, giving it a net 0.
Your rules are really beginning to annoy me.
They're also going to be adding The Day After Tomorrow, a big budget disaster movie that I did enjoy the one time, but I'm giving it 0 points. And then The Ring gets added, which is a classic horror movie remake. In fact, as far as American remakes of horror movies go, this is cream of the crop. It's one of the best. It's directed by Gore Verbinski. The cinematography is incredible in The Ring. If you've forgotten, this is an amazing looking horror movie. One of the best ever made, really, just in terms of how it looks, earning it a point on this list. But Freevee added Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, which is Transformers 2. Not my favorite of the series, but it's definitely one of the zanier, wackier ones they came out with some big, wild action sequences. So it does earn a point for that. And then they're also adding Mission Impossible 2 and Mission Impossible 3, probably my least 2 favorite out of the entire series, but they're still pretty badass. And again, totally free. Freevee picks up 2 points for those, as well as another point for Death Becomes Her. This is a classic directed by Robert Zemeckis, who is famous for directing movies that have cutting-edge technology and special effects. While most of the effects in Death Becomes Her are really dated today and don't really look convincing, they were cutting-edge back when this movie released, and as far as dark comedies go, this one does have some pretty solid laughs in it. Prime Video also added The Man in the Iron Mask, which is a good watch, but it is fairly outdated and only picks up 1 point on this list. I could say the exact same thing about Basic Instinct. However, this movie holds up surprisingly well, earning it 1 point. But when you consider that classic Sharon Stone scene, I'm gonna add 3 points for 2 reasons. 1, because I'm a pig, and 2, because Prime Video really needs the points in this race. They're also adding Saturday Night Fever, which earns a spot on the list, but it earns 0 points because I know none of you are actually going to watch it. Now, before jumping to the handful of top picks I have for each streaming service, I want to remind you all of the movies discussed can be found in the top pinned comment down below, as well as where you can stream them in different countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia, because they won't necessarily be available on Freevee or Prime Video where you live. But I've painstakingly found out where they're available, so be sure to go down, check out that top pinned comment, and if you like getting recommendations like this, definitely click the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. But La La Land just recently got added to Prime Video, and as someone who really does not have an affinity for musicals whatsoever, this is one of the best I've seen in decades. The storytelling is absolutely fantastic, which is not often the case with musicals. La La Land is kind of next level when it comes to that, and there are just some beautiful sequences. It's really top-notch filmmaking with some incredible acting, and Ryan Gosling is just one of my favorites. He's always great. La La Land is no exception. So that earns Prime Video 2 points, and then they're adding Cloverfield, which it's one of my top picks. I do love this movie. I think it's a fantastic take on the giant monster destroying everything genre, or at least it was back when it was released. If it's been a while since you've seen it, this is much more of a horror movie than you might remember. It's got some fantastic sequences you probably forgot about, but because it's so well known, it does only pick up 1 point for Prime Video. But I'm giving Prime Video 3 points for picking up Michael Mann's Thief.
You don't want to work for me? What's wrong with you? You do what I say. I run you. I want you work until you are burned out, you are busted, or you're dead.
This stars James Caan as an everyday thief, and it's an early look into what Michael Mann would be able to do with crime movies. He has done some of the best ever made, movies like Heat. Again, Thief is an early look at his filmmaking style, but it is a beautifully shot movie. It's been remastered. It's got that classic Michael Mann style, music by Tangerine Dream, and all of the thievery activity in this movie feels incredibly grounded and realistic. It's a top-notch flick, which is why it earns 3 points here at the finish line. But my number one pick for Prime Video this month is the classic John Wayne True Grit.
Now it's a rat rip for a rat, and this is lawful service of same. See? Doesn't pay any attention to me.
Now, I did like the Coen Brothers remake. It was filled with some great actors and it was a beautiful looking movie, but I am partial to the original, not only because I grew up with this movie, but I do think it's paced out really well. It's got some fantastic sequences. It was released in 1969. It still holds up today. It's one of my favorite characters that John Wayne has ever portrayed. But you also get some great little roles from Robert Duvall, and Dennis Hopper has a fantastic moment in this movie. If you've never really developed a taste for classic westerns, then True Grit may be a great way to go. It's less edgy than the Sergio Leone stuff, but it also has that typical 1960s feel that so many classic westerns are filled with, earning Prime Video 5 points right at the finish line. I will say they are adding the Black Phone to Prime Video later in the month of December. It's worth mentioning because it's the only real new release coming to the platform in this month, and I liked it okay, didn't love it. But I have even more top picks for Freevee, starting with Destroyer. This is a lesser-known movie that actually stars Nicole Kidman as an undercover cop. Yes, that is Nicole Kidman's face you're looking at. This is actually from the same director as The Invitation, a smaller thriller movie that I have recommended several times over the years. Sebastian Stan has a great role in here as well, and this is an edgy crime movie. It's got some really rough elements to it, and Nicole Kidman just steals the show. She is fantastic in this movie. If you generally like my crime movie recommendations, I highly recommend checking out Destroyer, earning it 2 points for Freevee. They're also going to be adding Mother with an exclamation point, which was Darren Aronofsky's last movie. His next one comes out this month. It stars Brendan Fraser. It's titled The Whale. Mother is one of his wilder movies, or at least his wildest movie since Requiem for a Dream. However, fans of Requiem for a Dream should really enjoy Mother if you haven't seen it yet. I'm not sure how many other people are really going to tie into this movie. It is weird, wild, over-the-top stuff. I'm not saying all Christians will hate this movie, but if that's a major part of who you are and your identity, you're going to be offended by this movie, trust me. Now, personally, based on where it is on the list, I would have given this movie 2 points, but because I know so many people were repulsed by this movie and hated everything about it, it actually earns a -2 on this list. But Layer Cake saves the day. This is one of my favorite English gangster movies. This was actually directed by Matthew Vaughn, who would go on to do movies like Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, and Stardust. But it was also an early look at Daniel Craig before he was James Bond. Now, I know he was in a lot of movies before this one, but this is him kind of playing a Bond-type character. In fact, I don't know that he would have been cast as James Bond had he not been in this movie. It's also worth noting that Matthew Vaughn used to produce Guy Ritchie's movies, which is something I love about Layer Cake. It is another English gangster movie, very much like Guy Ritchie's movies, except this one is polished and clean. In terms of the way it's produced and shot, it's almost the opposite of Guy Ritchie's early work, which is really cool to see. All the actors are great, there's a killer soundtrack, and a bunch of great moments. If you've never seen it, it is a top pick for me, earning it 5 points on this list. Personally, I consider The Island to be one of Michael Bay's most underrated movies. This is essentially the retelling of Logan's Run, which was featured in my latest cyberpunk video. If you didn't see that, it's very different from what I normally do. I actually don't speak in it at all. It's just retro wave music and footage from all the best cyberpunk movies. It's like 45 minutes long. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. At the very least, it could be something cool to put on in the background. But The Island has an incredible look to it. It's this real fantastic, futuristic movie that is fun, like a lot of Michael Bay movies, except the story doesn't get lost like a lot of Michael Bay movies. It actually makes a lot of sense. It moves forward. Again, pretty decent retelling of Logan's Run. It's got a good cast, but actually Scarlett Johansson is probably one of the stronger performers in the entire movie. She's really great in this, earning it 5 points on this list. But I'm not done, because they're adding a whole suite of fantastic Steven Spielberg movies to Freevee, starting with Catch Me If You Can.
I'd like to cash this check here, and then I'd like to take you out for a steak dinner.
This is one of the most fun movies I think Steven Spielberg has ever directed. If you didn't know, it is based on a true story. Obviously, DiCaprio is great, but it's also one of my favorite roles from Tom Hanks this century. I really love what he did with this character. Christopher Walken is amazing in this movie. There's a ton of cameos, and it's just a wild, fun ride directed by one of the greatest directors of all time, featuring some of the greatest actors of all time, and it never takes itself too seriously, which is one of the main things that make this movie so endearing. It is still a blast to watch today. Trust me, if you enjoyed it back when it was released and you have not seen it for a while, revisit it, you will not be disappointed. I could say the same thing for Hook. You'll notice I did not include this in the family-friendly section of the video because I think anyone can watch this movie, especially if you grew up with it like I did. There's a ton of nostalgia in it, but it's also an incredibly stunning movie. I mean, it came out in 1991, and it looks incredible. The production value on this was beyond belief back when this came out, and I have watched it with my young children within the last year, and I'm telling you, it holds up beyond your wildest dreams, earning it, I don't know how many points yet. And then they're adding E.T. the Extraterrestrial, another one. I promise you, if you have not seen it in years or even decades, it is amazing how well this movie holds up. And I'm saying that as someone who watched it maybe 3 weeks ago with my 6-year-old son. He was amazed by it. I was still captivated by it for so many different reasons, and there's so much nostalgia wrapped up in it as well. In fact, it's one of the most nostalgic movies for my generation for a bunch of reasons. Again, if you have not seen it for a while, take the time to rewatch E.T. You will not be disappointed. That Steven Spielberg suite earns the Freevee category a whopping 10 points for the entire list, making Freevee the clear winner on this particular video. Again, remember to like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. It's the best way to support creators that you like, but I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Prime Video Freevee comparison episode, and you will see me on the next one.